in. So I'm going to find her images and then adjust my settings, the rest of my settings. And I can kind of like fold the towel up underneath my elbow here too. So this raises and lowers. Put it right in front of you. You can kind of move this over wherever you need to be as neutral as possible. So they kind of suggest putting this over so you're straight ahead instead of like coming in at a weird angle, and then you can move this, and that's on that healthyssonographers.com. They talk about the triangle. Now this is not wanting to bring my screen down as far as I want it. Some of them, when you pull it out, it will let you still lower it. This one will not. Okay, so okay. Okay, 3, 4, or 5 on gray map. I'm just kind of adjusting that based on how well I see her walls, how well I can see inside. And then tint map 2, 3, or 4 tends to be what a lot of people like. Okay. So at this point, the image that we would have just taken would be the zooming in on the aortic valve. And then we come back out. You can stay zoomed in a little. You can come in a little bit more if you want. You've got to be careful, especially when you're first learning, that if you are using zoom, you may struggle to see your borders correctly if you're too far away or if you're too zoomed, either one. Okay, so your EKG, hers is kind of, the wire's probably being old. Let's see. She's got a little artifact in this. It's kind of hollering.
New York City skyline, yeah.
And now we're starting to stabilize.
Fraser, you know, the little drawing that you have of Fraser.
Yes. Okay, so QRS and then your T. Okay, so end diastole is your QR, and then between your R and your S, somewhere you start hitting systole, S to T. Is your systole over here. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna freeze. This valve opens during systole. Try to show the valve a little better. Okay. So I'm gonna go back here before it opens. I've chosen this cycle, so you can scroll back and forth and find a cycle that looks good. I'm gonna wait. We're still diastole, so aortic valve is not opened. You get right here, that S, it starts opening. And then I'm watching this as it gets bigger. And notice how this area contracts in. I want it the biggest, so I'm gonna come back a little. So I'm gonna be at mid systole. So not right after the valve opens, but usually it'll be somewhat close. I'm gonna hit measure. You're gonna use your kidney key to select and your trackball to help you. So the leaflets open up and go on the inside. What I want you to notice is right here. This is real, actually I'm gonna turn this off. This is real bright right here. This is the annulus. This is where that anterior cusp is coming into the annulus. We are not wanting to measure in the annulus, and we do not want to measure in the cusp. So you have to fully be in the LV for the LVOT measurement. So I'm going to come back here behind that annulus. And then notice we're kind of angled like this coming in, so I'm going to angle my measurement like that, and your LVOT is from the anterior mitral valve leaflet all the way to those cusps of the aortic valve. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to touch my wall with my caliper or my marker, and I'm going to set it. Your calipers, the two spots where they meet, the center right where they meet, that's called your crosshair. That is what you're putting on your border. So if your crosshair is sitting below your wall or in the wall, but not right on your border, then you're not where you need to be. So you got to really make sure that you are paying attention to your crosshair and where it's positioned. So this is that LVOT, and I hit save 1 to save my image. Okay, and then I'll take zoom off for my next so many images, and I'm going to bring my focus back down. I'm going to wait and kind of figure out what window I'm going to use. I'm going to do the aortic next. These technically can be done in any order, and if you get a really good image, a really good cycle showing, for instance, the LVOT and the aorta, which you're not always going to do, but if you did, you could use the same set of cycles or frames and just change your location to do the new measurement. So I'm going to start high. Remember I said we want to see as much of that as we can. And your rotation may end up being a little different too. Have you pause your breathing? Okay, breathe normal. So I'm like sliding towards her sternum, away from her sternum, coming up, coming down, trying to see how much of her aorta I can find here. Now, LVOT is done during systole, but the aorta is done during diastole. So in other words, the valve is closed, but you'll notice that what I saw live doesn't look as good frozen, and that happens a lot, particularly when you're looking at the aorta. So for her, I'm not sure if I'm actually going to be able to piece everything together here in one image. Okay, I've got the valve closed. I've got this as kind of as big and round as I can get it. I'm going to move my focus back up. Be able to get it here. So this is probably the one that's going to take you the longest, is just trying to find the best angle and seeing the most you can on the aorta. And you'll notice as far as rotation, I'm not necessarily paying attention to the rest of the heart, just the aorta for this. Should have taken it earlier. Words of wisdom, take it while you see it. I see it better in systole than diastole, but diastole is where I need it. So. I'm gonna go ahead and come down a rib space to the lower window. The higher window is a lot of times preferred, particularly for the ascending, but you're gonna have to take what you can get. So change rotation for this lower window, so that's why I unfroze it. Okay. So, diastole, where it's closed, biggest, roundest you can see it. And a lot of times we want that to be end diastole. Ideally, sometimes you have to go a little earlier in your cycle to really visually get it. Okay, I'm going to point out here, here's your coronary artery coming off. So I'm going to have to ignore that in what I'm about to do. Aortic annulus, that's your the annulus is where it inserts. We're not measuring that. We're going to do sinuses. So this is your sinuses of Valsalva. Remember I talked about that arch and it being kind of on its side. You're gonna have to come up to where the maximum curvature is and measure that, but you've got to be on the top side of the line. So I'm gonna use this border. This is from the right side of the heart. This is that aorta. And I'm gonna follow it around, and I'm gonna have to do a little guessing here because the opening of her coronary artery, where the ostia is just kind of right there, and it's blocking it. Her aorta kind of does this thing where it shifts directions, just like the LA can. This part of the aorta is sitting like this, so I'm gonna right against the bright. Notice I followed this border. I'm gonna do the same thing for the junction. Here's where it's dipping down. And I'm gonna make this parallel to my last measurement. You have to use the kidney key to set it. And sometimes you have to be a little more aggressive. Okay, the aortic diameter, I can kind of see my border right here, and then I lose it probably right beyond here for the posterior wall. So I'm going to come this way, right on top of that line. Again, crosshair sitting on it, and I can see this border coming out, and this is where that aorta curves and changes direction. So now I'm going to be perpendicular to this one, this angle. So notice it will not end up being parallel in this case to these other two. So that's your sinuses. Pull this back down. We're going to look at the LA. The LA is the most posterior, which means it has the most artifact or noise. This right here, all this junk, that is not true signal, so I can change my window and try to get rid of it. But when I do, I kind of have other issues. So I'm going to stay further down here, but I want you to notice, I'm going to back up a little bit. This is the wall, not this hazy stuff. I'm going to freeze. Okay, LA fills up during systole and gets as big as it can. And so the largest size is end systole right before this valve opens. So now we're in diastole because the valve's open. So I'm going to scroll back to the very second before that valve opened. And this is my end systole. So this is going to be my biggest dimension. So the LA is laying this way. So I'm going to come straight down. I like to put my hand up here too because that right pulmonary artery and some artifact will pop in. You want to kind of get an idea of where your mid LA is. Probably right about here. And I'm going to do inner to inner. This border gets a little hazy in here. But I'm following that bright white, knowing that this is not true signal. And this did line up with her sinuses of Valsalva, kind of mid to back of them. Okay, now I'm going to, for her, I just kind of pulled away from her sternum a little bit to see her LV a little bit more. One thing to keep in mind is if you angle too anteriorly, papillary muscle comes in. If you angle too posteriorly, the papillary muscle comes in. You want to be right in the middle, showing minimal papillary muscle for this view. I'm trying to make sure that I have my rotation correct because you want to see this nice and open, and you don't want to have papillary come in if you can help it. Okay. Now, before you take measurements on this, you would need to go through and find a cycle and look at diastole. So I'm going to start at diastole at my QRS, and I'm scroll through and make sure my image looks good all the way through systole. It does, so now I'm going to come back. Okay, ASE says end diastole for your measurement. We're taking this wherever it's visually biggest. So some places will say that's really on your isovolemic contraction time when the valves have just closed. And ASE will still call that diastole even though it's not. So just the messenger. I didn't set that up, but that's kind of what they do. So sometimes it's before that and sometimes it's at that moment. So we're going to scroll back. We're going to watch this cycle. I'm watching these walls go out because in diastole it's filling. I want to know where it's the biggest. And so sometimes that's right before the valve closes and sometimes it's right after. I feel like the walls kind of came in when it closed, so it's going to be right before it closed. So this is true into diastole. This was isovolemic contraction time. Okay? So we're going to hit measure. Everybody has a different electrical mechanical delay, so the signals have to send the electricity out and say, hey, I need you to do this. And then the heart has to receive it and then mechanically respond. So everybody's delay is different. That's why it's different for some people. They're really biggest in here or in diastole, and in others it's during isovolemic contraction time. Okay, so we're going to stay in the basal portion. We do not want to go through the mitral valve and we do not want to go through the papillary muscles. If you're at papillary muscles, you're in the mid portion of your LV and you're no longer in the basal segment. So we're going to stay close to these valves. And then we're going to make it perpendicular. Notice her heart, the LV is laying this way. I'm going to follow this wall from her aortic root. Notice there's some other stuff right here. I'm going to ignore that because that's RV trabeculation. And on some people that is more prominent than what we see on her. So I'm going to come right about here. And I'm measuring my wall. So I've selected Tycolts, told it diastole. I'm gonna measure both sides of my wall. Now notice when I pull this down, it tells me measure your ventricle. So I'm going to do that. Come in here perpendicular and measure the ventricle. Now I'm gonna measure the posterior wall. Clear that because I be a little closer on that border. Okay, your posterior wall is here. This bright is the pericardium, and we got to set right inside the pericardium. Again, perpendicular to this other count. You have to click and make it white to save it. And again, all of these are save one for your measurement. Now, I'm going to hit measure and clear. If I hold clear down, it takes my measurements off. I have to turn the measure off because I need to scroll forward. You are not going to unfreeze. If you unfreeze, you will not be in the same cycle, and that will mess up your measurements and your ejection fraction. So I'm watching this squeeze, and I'm waiting for the moment when I see the wall go back out, which it just did. I'll show you that again. Squeezing in, squeezing in. Top wall just started moving out. So I want to come back to the moment right before the top wall moves out. That's my maximum squeeze. I'm going to hit measure. You have to select Tycolts again. This time, it's not requiring you to measure all the walls. It just wants the internal dimension. So I'm going to select that. And I need to be about the same location as I was before. And even though I'm not measuring the wall, I'm finding my location by tracing my border, following my border, and then coming down here to the internal side. So this is your septum, the bottom part of it. So you have to be inside of that. Down here just a little. I think I'm a little high. Okay, again, make it perpendicular. Turn it white by clicking the kidney key, hit save one, and it gives an ejection fraction. Now, it always figures an ejection fraction, so even if it's not on here, you can find your ejection fraction by going to your report page. Here's where your Tycolts measurements start. If you go to the next page, EF, it will give an EF even if it doesn't show up on the screen, okay? So that is your 2D measurements for this practice. That's it. But it's gonna feel like a lot when you guys actually start doing it, so. All right, oh. I'm going to show you apical 5-chamber real quick because I failed to do that last week. And then you guys are going to split your time. And next week we're going to come in and we're just going to scan. Okay? The whole time. Okay. So 4-chamber. I've got to find a 4-chamber first. You can hold the probe like what you do for parasternal, or you can hold it underhand. You just do not do this and turn your wrist. You need to be very neutral. So I'm putting the back of my hand up against her. My thumb is on top, and I'm getting that window. Okay, so 4-chamber, all you're doing is you're taking your beam and you're angling it slightly up. Now for her, depending on how far we angle, we can kind of still see her right atrium and her tricuspid valve, but not real well. If I rotate my notch towards her feet a little, that opens up that aortic root more. Notice the right atrium and tricuspid valve disappear from my image completely. Okay, so I'm just taking the beam up. So for some people, you need to hear tail down, but for others, angling the beam up anteriorly you what you need to hear. We'll play around with that. There's that. So I want you to start practicing your measurements. Get split up.